News Talk 1400 KFRU is proud to present the KFRU Heritage Series. It's a one-hour perspective on the events and the people whose lives have contributed to the heritage of Boone County. Listen each Sunday at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. The KFRU Heritage Series. From News Talk 1400, KFRU.
Welcome to another Heritage program on News Talk 1400 KFRU. We're glad that you have joined us for this visit with one of the persons who some of you will recognize and know, and others we will introduce you to her. We've had an opportunity to do this over the last several months. It's been a great treat for me, and I know from emails and from feedback that we are getting from listeners that many of you like the opportunity also. Some of you are familiar with many of our guests. Others are learning of them, and they trigger thoughts that you have also about your experiences in Boone County and in Columbia. It's a pleasure to welcome to our studio for this program, Nancy Ginn Martin. It's nice to meet you. How are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you so much.
Oftentimes we start with a certain, we'll go back and then we move forward. I want to talk about you today and your involvement and interest in Columbia and Boone County today. I think it'll come out while we talk that you've, as far as I can tell from what I've done as my preparation, you're a lifelong Boone Countian?
I was actually born in Springfield.
Oh, well, we'll let that go then.
Well, thank you so much. But my mother was born in Boone County. My grandparents came here very early, and my great-grandmother lived here. And we moved back home to Columbia after my father had spent a short time as prosecuting attorney in Lawrence County. Okay. Elected against a 4-term Democratic incumbent, this young, brash law student right out of law school. But I was born in Springfield, Missouri, and then we moved to Jeff City for a short while and then back to Columbia.
Well, I'm glad that we'll understand that, but you feel the Boone County in your blood.
The heritage is there, yes.
We'll talk about that and some of the connections your family has with this county in a moment, but I want you to set the scene now. You're involved in many things, and from what I've read and what we talked about before we started the interview, a huge supporter of Lucille Salerno and what she's doing with the Ragtime Festival. But
absolutely,
what are some of the things that you have involvement in this community now that are important to you?
I think my pet, my most important thing is I'm at this point in time, it's a private genealogical research library I'm building in my mother and father's home. Wow. Books have been a very important part of my life. And I have possibly right now even a better collection than our and I adore our little Boone County Historical Society Genealogical Library. They have a few things I don't, but I have a few more things they don't. Yeah. And it's become a passion of mine. Eventually, it will go to both John Dugan at the State Archives and to the State Historical Society and parts to the Boone County Historical Society.
Well, I'm curious now because someone had just approached me about my family and what I knew about my family's genealogy, which I don't know much, but I'm curious as to when you talk about a library and when you talk about doing this and building this up, help us understand to what extent. What have you done?
I have about 4,000 books on the computerized. I have them cataloged and in several cases indexed, and several hundred boxes more waiting. It's much Boone County. I have a very amazing collection of books about places. All 50 states, several books on different areas, histories of towns. I have quite a little collection of books on churches.
And these are all Boone County connected?
A huge Missouri collection of Boone County churches. Then the heritage books are phenomenal, and you simply have to see one. Many counties, many cities have put together books of their old families. Actually, I discovered happily it must be in my blood, because there's a very famous old book called Pioneer Families of Missouri. I don't even know the author, done possibly around 1850, but in the early 1900s, my grandfather issued a reprint. He actually paid to have the book reproduced and reprinted. He had a little printing company called Lucas Brothers. And his copy is now on the rare book shelf of most libraries, and it's just quite charming. So then we have our county histories done by the two companies who split up our Missouri counties in around 1880 and did a history of each county with biographies in the back. So suddenly, if your family was in a county in the 1800s, they're probably written about in the back of those county history books.
Where do you find all these?
Well, they're hard to find.
I bet.
The State Historical Society has should have a collection of them all. I almost have a collection of all the county histories in the state of Missouri.
So have you go to sales?
Oh, yes, and yes.
Yeah.
And some of them I actually can find on Google. They're copyright free now. I simply download them, reformat them, and print them myself and get them bound.
Our guest is Nancy Ginn Martin, and we're talking about a fabulous collection. You said you would have how many books of this?
I have about 4,000 on my computer right now.
And these would be books of history of either Missouri or Boone County or cities or towns in this state?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
And you had this love and interest for a long time?
A very long time. Actually, it began with Mother. Mother started researching our family history a long time ago. And she and Mrs. Tom Botts tried forever to get her into the Daughters of the American Revolution. And there was always a church that had burned down or a courthouse that had been blown up by the Yankees or the Confederates. And she was never able to prove the records. And so it was her lifelong wish to do that, and she never quite got it done.
Mrs. Tom Botts, meaning the
Yes,
wife of
yes.
the coach over at the University of Missouri, the track and field legend over there.
She was a legend in family research. And she and Mother worked very hard together. But Mother went to Europe and looked into libraries and just...
So how far back do you know your family has been traced? How far back could you speak of knowing of this is part of my family?
This is not positive, and this is not proven. But one weekend, my darling husband was off playing a golf tournament, and I went on to Ancestry.com, and I actually tracked my father's line back, not to the Goths, but to the Visigoths, which is, I think, in about 500. The year 500. Truly, on Ancestry, you can, and of course, as I said, after several generations, I quit trying to prove it and just took it wherever it took me, and it was hilarious.
When you, I don't want to go back to 500.
I don't either.
But I'm curious as to go back 100 to 150 or so years. Do you ever find anybody in tracing your family and you say, oh, I would prefer that person wasn't known as part of my... Do you have some scoundrels there?
Yeah, well, I wish I did. I have been so disappointed. There was a family bit of family history that Wild Bill Hickok was my fifth uncle, whatever the heck a fifth uncle is. And so I researched Wild Bill Hickok's line on Ancestry, which, if you've never gone there, please do. It's an adventure.
It's on Ancestry?
Ancestry.com.
Ancestry.com, sure.
Go there, fill in your family tree. But if I've taught this for Lucille, by the way, I've taught some genealogy classes for her. I always advise my students and friends, start your family tree with your 4 grandparents. Don't start them with yourself. If you want to do your current pedigree, that's what it's called, do it on a private genealogy program that's not online.
I see. Okay.
Do it, build it. You can research it online, of course, but build the pedigree of your children, your grandchildren. All the living people keep off of Ancestry.
That makes great sense.
It does. But
privacy
start your pedigree with Ancestry, and you will have a marvelous adventure. But I researched Wild Bill Hickok, and dang it, I could not connect him with anyone, even the Gilmores out of southern Missouri. I couldn't make that line work back to Wild Bill. And then I found a husband of somebody named William Hickox.
Hickox.
Yes. And then there was talk about, who was it? There was some other infamous person that I totally disproved, darn it. And then I ran into the Holt Brewery book, black book, of habitual drunkards in a small town in England in 1903, and the police they'd actually taken photographs and done descriptions of these 87 unfortunate people who were habitual drunkards, and it was against the law to sell them liquor, and what a fabulous genealogical treasure trove. Two of my classmates, we just finished our 55th Hickman High School class reunion this weekend, and two of my classmates had their grandfathers. Now, it was the same name. It wasn't their grandfather in the book, and I immediately printed copies of the pages for them.
I bet they like that,
too
didn't it?
Funny. So, no, I haven't found any horse thieves.
No.
I've found a lot of preachers and a few lovers, but...
So what do you learn about, obviously you learn about these connections to individuals, but what do you learn about place? What do you learn about setting of where they were growing up?
Setting is very important. It's your surroundings. It's, were you a farmer? Were your ancestors, did they grow things in the hard dirt in Oklahoma? Did they try and farm in Wisconsin and live out the impossibly bitterly cold winters? Where they lived broadens their character, gives you some understanding of why you get an urge to plant tomatoes. Probably that happened a lot of generations ago.
But in Boone County, what kind of an identity? We had sometimes harshest winters, sometimes harsh summers, but when you think of a Boone Countian that would be defined by what you have read and studied as the history here, what do you come up with?
I think nobody's ever asked me that question before. I think that it's the personality. People who have roots in Boone County are genuine. They're kind. They're thoughtful. They want to help their neighbor. We really are kind of unique. If you've lived in South Miami, you know people aren't like that. If you've lived in California, they'd soon run over you, even with their bicycle, than stop and help. Wow. I think our Midwestern attitude towards each other is quite lovely.
And do you think that's still strong? We are a moving society now. People coming in and out.
I know it crops out in interesting ways.
Yeah.
Even our children, who are today, sadly enough, I think, so accustomed to everything that they don't think. Mm-hmm. And maybe the slowness of the country life gives us a minute to think before we act.
Yeah. I hope you still have some of that slowness of that country life. I think it's disappearing rather.
Yes, it is.
Disappointingly in many places. Nancy Ginn Martin is our guest. We'll take a break in a couple of minutes. Now, so did you go to school here?
Oh yes. I started
what were your schools?
I started with Eleanor Taylor in the lab school in kindergarten, and went through the lab school for through the fifth grade, and then I moved. The first year, West Boulevard School was built.
Wow.
We had our little sixth grade class in the teachers' lounge because our sixth grade classroom wasn't finished yet.
Oh, how about that?
And I went to Jefferson Junior High School and Hickman.
Yeah.
And
wow.
Then
And 55th. How many people returned for the 55th reunion?
We
recently?
had, and I'm still exhausted. I took naps all day yesterday. we broke up yesterday at noon, and everybody went home. We had 73 graduates, our Hickman classmate members and wives. I think we had 127.
127
Total people.
Total people.
Mm-hmm.
How many were in your graduating class? Do you remember that?
200 and either 24 or 27. Again, we're not sure. We've lost 49 members, and so we had 70.
About a third of them.
Yes,
still showed up.
Quite amazing for that. And we started at the Historical Society. Lute's Barbecue Can I mention people like that?
Why not? Go
Lutz
ahead.
from Jeff City came over and catered dinner. And Doc Wolf, of course, backed up his pickup truck full of beer. and we just had a wonderful time at the Historical Society, and Jen kept it open, and we were allowed to walk around and see the exhibits, and everybody loved it. The rest of it was at the Marriott.
Do they come back from far afield, or are many of them still here? Alaska.
One member came back from Alaska, California, all over.
We're come up to our first break, and we'll come back and we'll talk more with Nancy again, Martin, in just a few moments. You're listening to the Heritage Program on News Talk 1400 KFRU.
This is the KFRU Heritage Series.
Glad you're joining us for this Heritage Program on News Talk 1400 KFRU, and we're glad to have as our guest this time Nancy Ginn Martin, and we were talking about her extensive collection of books and information that she has on tracing her family history. And this is rather an interesting family history. I'm going to refer to something that Bill Clark wrote, and he did this in a column that he wrote about you and your husband. This goes back about a little over 6 years, so it was in 2006.
Yes.
But it's interesting as I read this. You come from, now help me out with this. You first of all, your dad was the only non-officer to head the Missouri State Highway Patrol.
That's correct.
And you told about him in the first segment as being a lawyer. So he had graduated. He was a lawyer. You said, I think he ran for a prosecuting attorney or something of that nature in Lawrence County or something like that?
Yes, he did.
So how did he come to be the head of the Highway Patrol?
He had met Forrest Donnell before Forrest Donnell became governor. And Forrest was impressed with this young law student who'd gone off and gotten himself elected prosecuting attorney. The Highway Patrol in the late 1930s, when it first began, actually was 3 highway patrols. There was one in northwest Missouri, and one down in the southeast corner of Missouri, and then sort of one in Jeff City. And when Governor Donnell became governor, he wanted them all working together. Mm-hmm. And he needed someone who would consolidate them, and it couldn't be an inside person because they already had their alliance somewhere. Mm-hmm. And so he commissioned Daddy and said, I want you to do it. And at first he did not want to do it. And he actually got appendicitis, was in the hospital, woke up one morning, and they handed him the paper, and there's a big headline, Governor Donnell has appointed Southern Missouri Attorney M. Stanley Ginn as head of the Highway Patrol, and he didn't even know about it. So at that point, he couldn't
That's how you
back
do
out.
it. You do it when you got somebody in the hospital.
Exactly.
Under anesthetic.
Right.
And you say, I'm going to give him this job. And then it's hard to turn that down after that. What year was this?
Probably 1941. I'm bad with numbers now.
And how many years did he serve approximately?
Not a lot, because he got it consolidated. He was the first person in the Missouri State Highway Patrol to hire women, and he hired them as radio operators.
Well, how about that?
And that's how women began working at the Missouri State Highway Patrol.
Mm-hmm. He unified them very well and then expanded what they were able to do.
Yes.
How about your mother? What was she like, and what was what was she doing during this time where your dad was being a lawyer and a prosecutor, and then also the Highway Patrol head?
She began her political career. Knocking on doors in little bitty towns in Lawrence County, asking people to vote for her husband for prosecuting attorney. She got bitten by a cat once. She fell through a front porch once. She had a man stand and poke his finger in her face and say, "Woman, go back to your home and cook. You have no business out here campaigning." It was grassroots politics at its best.
Where were some of those towns? Lawrence County.
Oh, golly Moses, I don't know. It's Mount Vernon was the county seat.
Now, what was your mother's first name?
Rosemary.
So now when you came to Boone County, I mean, you're from Republican cloth, right? Strongly?
Very. Yes.
This county has not been the kindest to Republicans at times, has it?
Well, Scotty Orr always said he only knew one Republican and one Jew in our whole class, and I was the Republican, and Happy Steinberg was the Jew, and we've all absolutely had a wonderful laugh about it. And Happy, by the way, was at the reunion this year, and it was such great fun to see him. He's such a great guy.
So I mean, but everything worked well. I mean, you come up here as was she still staunchly Republican, and was there any politics after the move and the situation here? I saw from the Clark article that I mentioned a while ago, a very vocal Republican and ambassador to Luxembourg from 74 to 76.
Yes.
Did you go there too?
We did. She was an amazing woman. I used to help her stuff envelopes and lick stamps and envelopes and take them to the post office. And on a really good day, at her little Royal portable typewriter, she might get off 20 letters.
Wow.
And we used to sit in later years with our feet on the windowsill and look out the window and drink coffee and wonder two things. One, what the world might have been like if we had had computers when she was doing all of that. And the other was what the world would have been like if we had been boys.
I think you might have changed it, huh?
Well, we did our part anyway.
Well, who was she writing letters to? 20 letters.
Oh, Mother began as national president of Mortarboard. She then moved on to national president of the college honor societies.
Wow.
In parallel, she was moving through the women's Republican organizations. She was first state president. Then she moved into the next office. She was national president of the Federation of Republican Women Voters. She was then on the national committee. She moved. Of course, the people you meet as you do things like this. Mm-hmm. She moved then. She was the first woman to ever chair a United States delegation to UNESCO.
Wow.
She was the first woman to ever land in Ashland in a helicopter.
What was the occasion for that?
Well, when Jack Danforth was running for senator the very first time, Daddy and Mother were his mentors. Mm-hmm. Actually, I asked Jack to come and speak at Mother's funeral. I called him and asked him, and he, is an ordained minister.
Mm-hmm, he is. Man.
And he was in South America or someplace. He called me back. He was so sad that he couldn't just stop everything and come back and be there.
Wow.
But they were very close. Mother was at Sally Danforth's side during that first election, campaign.
Wow.
And she shored up Sally, who was a very private person and still is, and just a beautiful, gracious person. But she was Sally's backbone, and she's, come on now, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. We have to appear here and we have to do that. And she was just right there behind her.
Well, sometimes, occasionally we are aware of spouses of those who are running for office, but sometimes we don't understand that the personality may not be something that would be very comfortable with the whole process.
It's a very difficult thing for a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
And sadly enough, in today's world, the color of toilet paper in the guest bathroom is also discussed at great length on talk shows in Washington, D.C. So nothing is private anymore.
No, there isn't much that is private. Now, what's the closest you got to doing political work?
I have shied away from it. I've been asked several times, and I just absolutely, I watched it from the underneath, from under the table, and actually truly, oh gracious, we had a marvelous orator, and his name is escaping me now, but he was a visitor at our house many times, and I may get his name, I may not.
That's fine.
And Daddy would say, now, you slip in under, we had a monster round old oak dining room table. He'd say, I'm 9 years old. Bring your pillow, bring your teddy bear, slip in under the table and stay under there and don't get anybody's way and listen. Yes, and I did. I spent a lot of nights under the table listening.
Wow.
And I don't know how I got off of that. Sorry.
No, that's all right. I think it sounds terrific. I think it would be great to be able to listen to somebody. I wish the name would come back. It would be fun to know who you were sitting there listening to.
He was a famous Missouri orator, and he was comparable to Everett Dirksen.
Wow. Nancy Ginn Martin is our guest on our Heritage program at KFRU, and we're just kind of visiting with her about her family history. And where were your hangout spots in Columbia when you're thinking of junior high and high school, and maybe where your family, the sections of Columbia that you lived in?
Well, we lived on West Boulevard South forever. We lived in the old house up front until we built the big house in the back.
Which side of West Boulevard South? West or east? It's a strange
west.
street for people who don't understand this. West Boulevard, it's west is like the name of a person, not a direction. Because when I lived in an apartment on West Boulevard for a while, and I had no idea, it's West Boulevard. I figured that described it pretty well, but then they wouldn't deliver my mail until I put north. So it was West Boulevard North.
Because there is a West Boulevard. It's terribly confusing.
It is confusing.
Yes.
But you were on the southwest Boulevard.
West Boulevard South, yes. Yeah. My grandparents bought 10 acres in the early 1900s, 1910, 11, 12, 13, 14.
At West, what became West Boulevard? 10 acres.
10 acres.
That'd be a lot of houses right now.
It was. It's where Key Groshong lives on the North 5.
The North 5.
The old house is still there. It was owned by Mike Cleek after Uncle Buddy sold it to Mike Cleek. And then it was owned by Mark Stevens. He and Clyde, I think was his wife's name, raised 7 children in the old house. And then, now I don't know who owns it. But there were 10 acres right next to it owned by an old man who had a broom factory. And there was an old house up in front, and the old man now lived in Chicago. This is after Daddy got back from the Philippine Islands in the war, probably in 45 or 46. And he went to Chicago, found the old man. He always called him an old man. Found him. He was living in the back of a factory. It was quite odd. He finally talked him into going to dinner with him, and he took him to a local lunch place or dinner place at some place in Chicago, told him he really wanted to buy that piece of property and talked him into it, wrote out the deed of sale on the back of a placemat, and I still have it.
Oh, my gosh. How about that?
So that was the other 10 acres. We built a lake. We, after a while, built a house.
Which lake? Is the lake still there?
It's still there. Do you know Mary McClary Posner?
The name, yes.
Well, she lives there, but she has subdivided the front strip, and there's some lovely condominiums on the front of the street, but in between a couple of them is a big gate, and the big house is back there. Mother did the plans. They actually built it from her blueprints.
Wow. And this would have been 40s, you say?
50. The house was finished in 56. We laid the cornerstone in 1956.
As an aside here, as you're looking through these books about your dad and stuff, my dad served in the Philippines in World War II
really?
also.
So. Where was he?
Well, I knew you were to ask me to get, I can only get as specific as the Philippines, I'm sorry to say. I wish I had more information, but I'm not sure yet. Where, Alex?
Daddy was in Subic Bay, and that's another story because he was asked to furnish the workforce in the military naval shipyards, and I think the number was 10,000 workers each day they needed. And they said, "Do what you have to do." So he built a village, had them come in, build a village, and the story of the fishnets is another story, but what you asked about the politics.
Yeah.
How do you handle the families of 10,000 people? And it's all brand. He did the only thing he knew how to do. He organized it into political townships. He organized it into had all of the political process, the sheriffs, the deputies, the mayors of the townships. They had a town council, and he got the attention of somebody named Magasaysay, who was going to eventually, he was the guerrilla general in the Philippine Islands when they were fighting the Japanese.
Yep.
And he sent his men down to get him. And they went to the town fathers. They, who Daddy trusted, came to him and they said, will you come into the jungle and talk to General Magasaysay? And Daddy taught him politics around the campfire in the middle of the jungle. Wow. Several nights he spent with him, and then the men would take him back from their hiding place. I'm getting goosepimples.
Yeah.
And that's how democracy really came into the Philippine Islands.
Did he record this? I mean, was he a good record keeper? Or?
Never. When he got back home, he started a group called the Vigenti. That's the Honored 20. They thought up their own name. And it was 20 students, seniors from the law school, a few from the journalism. And every Sunday night, all through the winter, they met around the big table in the dining room, and Daddy taught them grassroots politics.
Was that here?
Right here in Columbia, Missouri, right on West Boulevard.
Wow, those were the 20 were...
Those are people like Rush Limbaugh's brother, who's now a judge. They're all judges. They're all attorneys. They're all businessmen. The gentleman who, Pukta, who had a winery over in Herman, was one. It's absolutely amazing who's who of Missouri statesmen, and they all went out. They all were honorable citizens. Don't think any of them ever landed in jail. Yeah. It was really fun.
How about that? I mean, that's quite a story. That would be a great story to tell.
I'm writing a book about him, but it's gotten shelved because of my little love of the country schools.
Well, we're going to talk about we'll talk about just to touch upon that topic in our last segment, which we're getting ready to go to right now. This is our Heritage Show, and you're listening to it with the guest today of Nancy Ginn Martin. Stay with us. One more segment to come on News Talk 1400 KFRU.
This is the KFRU Heritage Series.
Hope you've enjoyed listening to our Heritage Show today. We've enjoyed talking to Nancy Ginn Martin about, she was saying as we were taking our break, this isn't really about Boone County, but it is. It's about people in Boone County, people with connections to Boone County, and we just like hearing good stories on this program, so no problem apologizing. Now, in our last segment, you were talking about sneaking as a 9 or so year old with your blanket and your teddy bear going underneath this big table in your house. And your dad would say, you get down here and listen because you're going to hear a wonderful orator, and you've come up with the name.
It was Dewey Short.
Now tell us about Dewey Short.
Well, I really don't. He was a congressman, I think, in the state legislature, and one of the old stump-speaking type orators who was just had a voice that would carry for a half a mile. And the night, I remember, will never forget, I scrabbled under the table and cuddled up in my blanket and started to listen, and Daddy got him started reciting poetry. Oh. And we heard The Cremation of Sam McGee. We heard The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. It was endless. And I actually felt they had to get me, after the party was over, they carried me to bed because I had fallen asleep under the table listening.
How about a great way to spend a night, huh?
Yes.
You mentioned before we went into our last break that you have another project that you're working on right now. We hope to talk about this on one of the morning programs on KFRU because I think people would be excited to know about this, and people respond and react to these sometimes. And any of us who are not here during the one-room schoolhouse days, we still know that there are so many streets around here that are named after, I'm going to guess, the schools that were there. That's probably what preserves those memories more than anything else. Tell us about your project.
My treasured friend, Diane Hart Fay Miller, I met not early on in our lives, but after I had moved back to Boone County. She was a classmate of my husband Bob's, so she was a big senior when I was a lowly sophomore at Hickman High School. Diane's great aunt, whom she called Aunt Toddy, was actually Alpha Hart Lewis.
Oh, wow.
In my lifetime, at Hickman High School, she was the librarian. None of us knew that in the 40s, she had become the first and only woman ever to be elected county superintendent of schools. Now, there's a hilarious anecdote I shall tell on our next program about that office.
Okay.
But it has to do with O.V. Wheeler and the last person elected superintendent of schools, and Laugh-In, Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. So that now you're primed. You will have to wait.
Oh, you leave us hanging.
But Aunt Toddy served 2 years as superintendent of schools, and when she died, she did not have any children, and Diane asked for all of her papers and got them. And it included a fabulous, fabulous collection of photographs of the country schools, which Aunt Toddy had taken herself, gone out with her little brownie box camera and taken pictures of each school she visited, and pictures of the school children. Diane put them all in a giant 3-ring binder and spent 20 years going around getting them identified. And she worked at State Farm, so she'd take it to the second floor one week and the third floor the other week. And one night she was showing it to me. I said, "Golly, Diane, we need to write this. This is history, and it's going to go away with your book. It's going to be locked there. We must write it." So
that's what is. Go ahead.
114 Boone County country schools, not all in existence all at the same time. Some came and some went, and we almost have, they're all identified, of course, but I have almost proven all of their identities. We do need community help. There are a few photographs of a few schools we don't.
Yeah.
And if I could possibly give you a list and you could put them on your website or something, I would so love it.
Yeah,
because
you should do that.
All I need to do is borrow them for a second and scan them, and I will give them right back. And much credit to each person who in the book who would loan us a photograph.
Do you know, I think curiosity of those of us who never have attended a one-room schoolhouse, when the last one was in existence, or what the time frame you're looking at?
In around 1947, I think, is when they began consolidating the little schools into the bigger ones. Some of them stayed for a little while after that, but pretty quickly after that, the country school children moved into the big cities and towns of Boone County, and the little schools just sat there.
Are there many of those school buildings still left in Boone County?
Very few. The State Historical Society has one. Shelter Insurance has one, but it's not from Boone County. However,
I wondered where that one is
it's
from.
It's a wonderful representative. If you want to go out and tour, it's a lovely, charming
Shelter
little
Gardens,
place.
right
Shelter
off
Gardens,
of
yes,
Broadway,
yes.
as you're heading west before you get to Stadium.
Yeah,
Huh.
yeah.
I just wondered, and I think there was news a few years ago about a family who did a one-room schoolhouse. It was someplace, I think, up northern part of Columbia. Maybe they made it into a home or something like that.
I think a couple of them have been made into homes, but you see, the very few of them were brick. The one out where you turn off to go to the airport down at 63 South was brick, but I think even that has gone into decay.
So this is a project. You'll come up with a book that you hope to publish that will have plenty of pictures and stories of these one-room schoolhouses.
Yes.
Well, best of luck with that.
Thank
we
you,
hope to talk to you on KFRU about that again at another time. Just a few moments left in our visit. When we ask people to be guests of the Heritage Show, they don't know what to expect sometimes, and we don't know what to expect either when we first start to sit down and talk with people. But you had jotted down some notes on a piece of paper. Anything that we didn't cover that you thought we were going to cover today?
Well, my notes read John Dugan, hosted by David Lyle. A phone number, Monday morning at 11 o'clock.
So it just gives you where you're supposed to be and who you're going to be working with here.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, I see. Well, I thought you had like some secret stories.
There's another
in one
name.
Final story.
There's another name, Kevin Walsh. Why is that name written
Well,
down?
Kevin was our
he
guest
was a
on
previous
a previous
guest. That's
guest.
it.
So
Okay.
you've done your homework on us pretty well. I'm curious as to. I'll ask you to maybe tell me one more story that we've referred to Bill Clark's article in March of 2006. He describes you as a crack shot, first with an air rifle and later with her trusty 28 gauge. I have a hard time seeing you going out toting rifles.
Thank you very much, but I was a tomboy. I really tried. Daddy only had 2 girls, and I was sick. I thought I took it personally. So I could run faster, shoot straighter, ride a horse harder, and spit a watermelon seed farther than any boy I knew.
Really?
Yeah.
Did the boys like that, or were
No.
they kind of intimidated by you by that?
I think some of them still are.
So, what have you seen? What have you seen of the growth in Boone County? What strikes you as what remains that if your parents were here, they would look at this and say, "Yep, that's Boone County," or would they say, "Wow, this is so different. I don't recognize it anymore"?
I think they would say, "Wow, this is so different, and isn't it fantastic?" Daddy always used to say, in the olden days, it was location, location, location. But today it's connectivity, connectivity, connectivity.
Yeah, it is.
He studied in books with an oil lamp, and at age 85 was getting into arguments with me on the user-friendliness of Eudora Pro as opposed to Procom.
Oh, my.
He taught himself DOS, taught himself how to type when he was 85 years old.
Wow.
Amazing. Just amazing.
Well, we appreciate you sharing the stories with us today. Thank you very much for being our guest.
Thank you so much, David.
We will be back with another Heritage Show shortly and soon. We hope that you'll listen to that. Feedback always welcome. You can let me know what your thoughts are or suggestions at david.lyle@cumulus.com. Nancy Ginn Martin has been our guest, and again, we appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much, David.
This is News Talk 1400 KFRU.
You've been listening to the KFRU Heritage Series, celebrating our history and heritage of Columbia and Boone County. Listen each Sunday at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. The KFRU Heritage Series. From News Talk 1400, KFRU.